The Strait of Hormuz is closed, the world fears a new economic crisis, while the region walks on the edge of total war. Europe, late as always.
From Lisbon, this is Frontlines and Backrooms Brief, the stories shaping the week.
Welcome to Frontlines and Backrooms Brief. The cost in human lives is rising in Iran, but around the region as well, especially in Lebanon. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Global markets are bracing. The region is on the edge of total war. But in Washington, in legacy media, the conversation has already narrowed to a different question. Who pushed whom into this? Was it President Trump's impatience or Israel power and influence over the Washington administration? It is a useful debate for US cable news. But for the rest of the world, the one that will pay the price, it is almost entirely irrelevant. Because the real story isn't who pushed whom into this. The real story is what we are being asked to believe. Again, less than a year ago, President Trump stood before the world and made a defiant statement.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Fast forward 8 months, President Trump informed us.
Their missiles are being wiped out rapidly. Their launchers are being wiped out. If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon.
Which raises an obvious question. Iran's nuclear program was not obliterated, or it was obliterated, but Iran somehow managed to build up everything to a 2-week nuclear weapon-ready notification. Or we are witnessing the George Bush Iraq moment inside the Trump administration. The question is, are we going to believe the same story again, this time with much bigger consequences for the region and for the world? Similarities: 23 years ago, another administration made another urgent claim. Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. The intelligence claims were presented as firm. They turned out to be false. We know how that ended. No stockpiles, no program, thousands of American lives, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives. A region destabilized for a generation. The officials who made those claims didn't go to jail. They wrote memoirs. They did the Sunday shows. They became a part of Board of Peace. The cost was paid by others. But Iran is not Iraq, a country of 26 million where the Sunni minority ruled over the Shia majority. Iran is a country of 90 million people. Nearly 95% are Shia Muslims. For 47 years, they have lived under a regime built from the beginning to survive, with or without supreme leader. Is there any opposition in the country? Absolutely. Are they capable to overturn regime? There is no clear sign of that. And you can't say we are doing this for your own sake, and on the first day of campaign, kill 170 schoolgirls with expectation that the people overturn regime from within. Here's what makes the US-Israel case even more complicated. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, has repeatedly stated that it has no evidence of systematic nuclear weapons program in Iran.
We never had information indicating that there was a structured, systematic program to to construct a nuclear weapon. So we have to balance the two things. Yes, many reasons for concern, but there wasn't to be a bomb tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
While Washington argues about timelines and who said what, when, and to whom, the region is burning. For the first time, missiles are falling on the Gulf countries. Collectively, they demonstrated restraint. The restraint is not guaranteed, especially if the missiles continue to fall. Israel is bombing Lebanon, expanding the so-called buffer zone further into Lebanese territory and closer to the capital Beirut. The region is one misstep away from total regional war. When Hormuz closes, the global economy feels it within hours. The strait, which carries 20% of oil and 20% of natural gas, is closed. Oil is up 10%, with analysts warning that 100 to 110 US dollars per barrel will be our new reality if closure continues. Qatar suspended LNG shipments, and gas in Europe spiked 50%. An industrial slowdown is imminent if this continues. For every $10 oil increase, economic growth cuts by 0.1 to 0.2%. At $110 per barrel, that's real pain for everyone. And finally, the question no one is asking in prime time: if this war continues, who wins? Russia benefits immediately. Oil prices rise, attention shifts away from Ukraine, and Western unity is tested once again. China, since Iran uses a significant amount of Chinese-made military hardware, is essentially getting a free live fire test of its technology against the US military. Every Tomahawk missile and carrier group the US moves to the Persian Gulf is one less asset available for the Pacific. Beijing prefers a US military that is distracted by Iran rather than focused on containing China in the South China Sea. Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, because this war could consolidate their power, justify further repression, and silence dissent. At the end, Iranians are proud descendants of one of the world's greatest civilizations, the Persian Empire. It is hard to believe that a nation like that can be bombed into submission, something that doesn't show in intelligence reports. The European Union spent decades building a single voice on foreign policy. This week, that voice fractured in public, and the silence from Berlin may have been louder than any speech. It started with undiplomatic outbursts from President Trump. During a meeting with the German's Chancellor, Trump openly attacked another EU member, Spain.
Spain has been terrible. In fact, I told Scott to cut off all dealings with Spain. Spain, first of all, it started when every European nation, at my request, paid 5%, which they should be doing. And everybody was enthusiastic about it, Germany, everybody. And Spain didn't do it. And now Spain actually said that we can't use their bases, and that's all right. We could use their base if we want. We could just fly in and use it. Nobody's going to tell us not to use it, but we don't have to. But they were unfriendly. And so I told him we don't want to. Spain has absolutely nothing that we need other than great people. They have great people, but they don't have great leadership. And as you know, they were the only country that in NATO would not agree to go up to 5%. I don't think they would have agreed to go up to anything. They wanted to keep it at 2%, and they don't pay the 2%. So we're going to cut off all trade with Spain. We don't want anything to do with Spain.
The target was Madrid, but the silence that followed came from Berlin. German's chancellor sat in the room and said nothing. Not a word in defense of a fellow EU member, not a murmur about European sovereignty or the principle of diplomatic consultation. But when Trump mentioned Ukraine, suddenly Merz found his voice. The message was received across Europe. Some allies are worth defending, others are not. Spain, however, didn't blink. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez delivered a response that may outlast this entire event.
La posición del gobierno de España se resume en 4 palabras: no a la guerra.
The position of the Spanish government can be summed up in 4 words. No to the war. The world, Europe, and Spain have been here before. 23 years ago, another U.S. administration dragged us into war in the Middle East. We must learn from history and cannot play Russian roulette with the fate of millions of people. The rest of us must act consistently, defending now the same values that we defended when we talk about Ukraine, Gaza, Venezuela, or Greenland.
It was calm, it was principled, and it drew a line that Germany would not. In much of Europe's media, Sánchez was not celebrated as a defender of EU principles and values. Instead, he was portrayed as a political opportunist, gambling with Spain's economy and trying to rally the left at home. Criticism was widespread, from Euronews and France 24 to Politico Europe and Reuters. Sanchez's approval rate is indeed low, around 34%. Maybe he really wants to overtake the left in Spain. But for media outlets that still believe the liberal international order is alive and well, where if you are not with us, you are against us, still defines the rules, Sanchez's stance create an uncomfortable moment. A moment that reminded Europe that political defiance, moral or strategic, is still possible. Not a single word of criticism in European media followed President Trump's public humiliation of an EU member state, essentially declaring that Spain was a country where American jets could land and take off whenever Washington decided. For decades following Washington's lead was easy under the umbrella of US security guarantees offered for free. Now, as Europe faces the question of building its own security architecture, another dynamic is emerging: the quiet competition to remain in Caesar's favor. This was not just a diplomatic spat, it was a stress test of European cohesion. Germany, the self-declared leader of Europe, chose silence when smaller member was publicly humiliated. Spain, often dismissed as a peripheral voice, stood its ground and articulated a consistent foreign policy, whether the topic is Ukraine or Gaza, Venezuela or Greenland. The fracture is real, and it's not about left or right. It is about which capitals still believe in a common European foreign policy and which have quietly stopped pretending. What happened this week was more than a diplomatic dispute between Washington and Madrid. It revealed something deeper: a Europe still searching for its own voice, and a global system where power, narratives, and alliances are shifting faster than many capitals are ready to admit. In the next brief, we will examine how a series of public statements from Chancellor Merz, President Trump, and Defense Secretary Hegseth dismantled key principles of international law, piece by piece. For now, the region watches the skies, the markets watch the Strait of Hormuz, and Europe continues its search for a single voice. And that's the world this week. From the front lines and the backrooms, I'm Vladimir Bobetic, and until next time, keep looking beyond the noise.